Okay, everybody, we are live. Welcome, welcome. Hey, for those of you that are live here with me, I know that some of you guys are starting to pop in right now. Go ahead and just start typing in, where you're from. Love to know who you guys are. I know if some of you guys are watching this recording later, which is perfect. You can always type in where you're from. We'll comment on that comment later. But anyways, really excited to have you guys here talking about really the 5 steps to creating more money now. So Daniel, hey, good to see you again from Louisiana. Definitely good to see you on here as well. I know Danielle, we got Daniel and Danielle on here too. So today I get often asked, people keep asking me, they're like, well, what do we do? Like, what is exactly is it that you do, Chris? Like, how have you helped literally hundreds, now going into over 1,000 people create more cash flow? Really, and this has been over the last, good grief, like, I don't know. It's been, I guess it's been going on now 15 plus years. 19, I would say 19 years since I really started to wake up to a new way of thinking. We'll talk about it here in a bit, but really over 15 years as we've been really getting focused on cash flow for people. And I know that's the big thing that you might be here too. Shane from Idaho, good to see you here as well. All right, so here's the big thing. If I could show you how you could create financial freedom without a lot of time, without a crap load of money, like millions of dollars, you don't have to start a new business that claims you're going to make passive income, and you don't even need a lot of financial education, just like hundreds of my clients and I've already done over the last 15 years. Is that something you'd like to see done? If so, this is what you should be watching right now, because that's what I want to talk about today, because we're going to cover first and foremost, like, where do we actually find money for our clients? And then where, of course, too, can it go to? Like, what are our favorite financial investments that actually financial advisors don't want you to know about, or they don't even know about themselves? And I was this person too. And then, of course, as the topic covers today, what are those 5 steps, we've developed over time with hundreds and hundreds of clients that even I've personally worked with, as well as many of our team has as well, to help you increase your cash flow forever, which ultimately is what creates financial freedom. And of course, I'm going to talk about our passive income calculator that you can actually use and fill out, and what you should be doing with that today. Now, as a start, some of you guys may or may not know this, but I started out being a financial advisor. Before, as the anti-financial advisor, I was the mainstream salesman in a suit financial advisor. And of course, like all great financial advisors, I was a financial broker, which means I was a broker than you were. And this was the house I lived in. This was my starter home. Not a horrible home. It was a cute little home, especially for a young family starting up. But I'll tell you, like, I was not raking in the dough as a financial advisor, not only just from the sales standpoint, but also because I was just trying to be cheap. I was trying to be this cheap person that would turn off the heat in the wintertime. I would turn off the AC in the summer. I would do everything I could, because my goal was, if I could just save up a whole bunch of money, right? If I could just save up all these little nickels and dimes and everything else, then hopefully I'd have enough someday to stuff in these mutual funds, and then maybe have a couple $1 million to then live on the interest. That was my goal. However, my inspiration actually was my dad for going into being a financial advisor. Although I was planning to become a business consultant, I figured I should have real life business experience before telling people how to run their businesses. The thing that intrigued me about being a financial advisor is because I wanted to know how to become financially free. And most importantly, I wanted to help others do the same, because my dad, I grew up with him saying, we can't afford things, right? We can't afford it. What do you think I am, made of money? Money just grow on trees. Hey, type in here if, like, Y for yes, if this was your family too. By the way, hello to Mike from Honolulu and Nicholas from Illinois. But if you were that kind of person where you grew up with, like, we can't afford this, money doesn't grow on trees, those kind of things, that scarcity mindset, definitely, comment below. But that was me, that's what I was raised in. And the thing that affected me the most is that my dad said, it's like, Chris, I'm going to probably die working. The stress from my job will probably kill me. So I figured, not just financial freedom for myself, but if I could help him become financially free, this would be worth it. Well, Steve from Houston, welcome. And well, here's the deal. So 4 years later, my dad reaches out and says, are you going to advise me at some point? When are you going to give me some help? For the first time in my life, I saw his finances, because he was very guarded with it. And as I sit down at his kitchen table, the same one he told me we couldn't afford stuff, I start looking at all his finances. Now, you understand, my dad was dirt cheap. This guy saved everything. He stuffed the money in his 401k. He got the match like good boys and little girls should, right? He had actually paid off all of his debt, including his mortgage. He was totally debt-free. This guy was Dave Ramsey's poster child. And then when I looked at his numbers, I said, Dad, you're 61 years old. If you want to retire today, you better hope you die in about 5 or 6 years, because that's when you're going to run out of money, even living on his conservative lifestyle. Now, guys, it wasn't because he didn't save. He did save. He was the model example of saving. He saved everything he possibly could, yet it wasn't enough. He said, "Well, Chris, what do I do?" I said, "I don't know. I don't know what to tell you because honestly, you did everything right from what I taught as a financial advisor." Well, just a few weeks later, I'm talking with a friend of mine who he actually was trained by me to be a financial advisor, but then he left to go do real estate investing. And he tells me, he's like, "Chris, my dad and I, we've partnered on some real estate deals, and we've now doubled his income in the last 4 or 5 months." I said, "When that's wait, you got to that's too good to be true. There's no way that that's possible." And he got me right between the eyes. He's like, "Chris, well, how many of your clients are truly financially free where they don't worry about money? Even the ones you've been working that you've had known other advisors working with for decades." Well, none. They're all worried about running out of money too soon or outliving their money. Okay. Well, how about this? How many of you guys as financial advisors have it figured out? Because you guys should have it figured out. How many of you are financially free, not off the commissions you're earning, but actually doing these investments? And as I really remember, this is 2005. And so 20 years ago. And I'm thinking back, I'm like, well, there's guys been working here since the 1970s. No, they don't seem like they can retire. So maybe none. There's your problem. And this is what kind of sent me on a journey, guys. It kind of like got me to look for more answers. Eventually, I actually quit being a financial advisor, vowed never to teach about money again. I was being a mortgage broker, and I was teaching ballroom dance on the side, and even doing some stock coaching. And then, of course, as I'm learning about what these guys knew, I was able to create financial freedom for myself later that next year in 2006, when I was 28, almost 29 years old. In fact, later that year, I actually bought this house. I kind of skipped a couple houses, upgrade in the process, right? About this like over 5,000 square foot home. And it was a show home and everything. Now, I'll tell you, that wasn't the end of it, because 2006 was great. 2007, I realized I couldn't retire because I got bored. I lost purpose. So I wanted to come out and teach people how to do what I did. The problem is, you guys know what happened going into the end of 2007 into 2008, 2009, right? We had the recession. So I went from that wonderful house to living in a van down by the river. No, just kidding. I didn't actually go live in a van down by the river. We did have a minivan. That actually the banks were trying to repossess. So we hid it in the garage so that they couldn't collect on it. But I did go from millionaire to like upside down millionaire. I mean, I went over $1 million in debt because my real estate was tanking. The business we had started was tanking. Most of the people had started to quit. We were barely, not even in bankruptcy. Even myself personally, I was just avoiding bankruptcy because I was so dang stubborn. It would actually have been easier for me financially if I had filed for bankruptcy to hit the reset button. But I was just stubborn. And I'll tell you, like, somehow in my mind, I saw you in the future, right? I saw me being able to help you. I figured, if anything, if my pain can become your gain, if I could learn something from this to be able to maybe even do it twice. What if I became financially free twice? Because I was back in the rat race. By the way, I had stopped teaching people how to get out of the rat race by 2008, 2009. Instead, I was teaching people how to find money. And this is a big part of what we're talking about today as we go into this first thing. And I'll tell you, like, I know what it's like to live in scarcity. I know what it's like to be broke. And I know what it's like to come back, because by the end of 2016, I was able to not only pull out of that debt hole, but able to become financially free for the second time, where I had enough passive income coming in to pay for my monthly expenses. I don't say this to brag, because obviously I screwed up. It took me, twice to learn the lesson that it should only take somebody once to do. However, the great thing is I was able to prove it for myself, and we helped others do the same. And so, like I mentioned, I was overcome this huge debt hole. I learned this, is that it's always about cash flow. It's not about your net worth. Net worth is worthless unless it leads to more income coming in, where you work because you want to, not because you have to. I call that work optional. And that's why cash flow creates freedom, because the more cash flow you have, the more difference you have between your income and expenses without having to live on rice and beans. The bigger the difference is, the more freedom, the more options that you have. And I'll tell you, our typical client finds at least 20,000 in the first year alone. Some of them even to the six figures from time to time. But here's the problem, guys. Again, we've been taught by financial advisors that we're supposed to do the same thing. We got inflation that's been still roaring right along, right? And somehow we're supposed to still keep up with that standard of living. We got interest rates are staying higher for longer. They're going crazy here. We've got the national debt that literally, like, we watched it go up like by $1 trillion in just 4 months, all this stuff happening. And then we have people tell us to live on rice and beans. It's our fault that we're living beyond our means, even though inflation is kicking our butt. And that's the reason why we have to keep making more money, and we don't make enough money to do that. So we have to keep living cheaper. And then they blame us for that. And the problem is this, that you get people out there like financial experts telling you to live on rice and beans and just to stuff your money in mutual funds and somehow it's going to be okay. But here's the problem, guys. He's telling you things like save $100 a month and you'll be a millionaire in 40 years because you'll make 12% a year. Problem is, one, he did the math wrong. $100 a month only gives you 979,000, not 1.176. So he can't even do math right. Two, the market hasn't been averaging 12%. It's been averaging more like 8.5% over the last 30 years. And so you got all this crap going on. And then you got people like, this top comment, if you can read it here, she says like, hey, I've been following your advice for like over 20 plus years, 20, 30 years, and I'm broke. What do I do now? Well, if you followed somebody's advice and you're still broke, maybe you should stop following that advice, right? Because less cash flow equals more stress. And this is not just affecting you, but it affects your children. And it creates a legacy that goes beyond just you. It makes it worse. It just passes on this scarcity forever. If you want it to change, if you want your children's life to be better, and I know you're good parents, you want that. If you want to be better, you have to stop the cycle right now. And the best way to do that is just do the opposite. Like Jerry Seinfeld said to George Costanza, right? Who obviously had a hard time, wasn't getting the right results. He says, well, every instinct if you have is wrong, then the opposite would have to be right. What if we just did the opposite? What if we instead focus on cash flow instead of focus on just trying to accumulate a bunch of money in mutual funds? Okay, I'm ranting a little bit here. Everybody with me so far, type Y if you are. And if you're like, I have no clue what you just said, I just jumped on 2 seconds ago, But definitely make sure you're checking in that I'm just ranting here. But here's the opposite thing. Instead of focusing on accumulation and compounding your interest, acceleration of money, speed of money is everything. Because how many of us want to wait 30, 40 years to find out it didn't work like my dad did? Do any of us want that? Of course not. We want it to know what happens right now. And especially if it could benefit our lives right now. How many of us have been stuffing money in our 401ks and retirement plans, locking away in prison, stuffing money by paying down our houses and everything else? That money's locked away from us. Does it do anything for our day-to-day life today? It doesn't. You can't have financial freedom now if you're constantly locking your money away from you in the future. And then you're hoping it's still going to be there. You're hoping it's going to work. By the way, I locked tons of equity away in my house that I foreclosed on in 2009 because I thought I could just cash out refinance if I needed it. Not realizing that the market tanks, I could lose all that equity, which is exactly what happened, right? And so you can't just expect to lock your money away in a house away from you and expect it to work. You can't just lock your money in 401k, hope the market doesn't go down, which by the way, that average of 8.5% is after the last 16 years we've had up market versus just one down year in 2022. Understand that from 2009 till now 2025, we've had 16 years, 15 have been up, one down. That is way out of whack, way beyond the average. What if you got your money locked up? What if you're hoping to retire in the next few years, maybe 5 or 10 years, and then the market tanks? Do you know that even the guys like JP Morgan and companies like this, the big fund institutions are expecting the market to only grow by an average of maybe 3-4% in the next 10 years. Guys, that's not a lot. That means you can put your money in a CD and probably do better off. By the way, we're going to show you better options than a CD. So here's the big picture, right? Here's the big thing is that, it's about understanding these principles. How do we create acceleration first with money? Secondly, we have things like max ROI, infinite banking. It's not making a big focus of that today, but that's a nice tool to kind of throw a lot of extra fuel in the fire. And then using passive income investments to create passive income now versus waiting years and years to see whether or not you got enough money to live on. How about if you can create income right now, you know exactly the money that's coming in. And it requires a complete shift of perspective. You got to be willing to take that red pill, take that matrix red pill versus the blue pill and wake up and just trust your financial advisor who is also broke, who also can't retire if he didn't keep making commissions off of you, leaving your money in there so that they keep making money off you even when you don't make money. I hope you don't mind if I just get completely blunt about that because, again, I was a financial advisor. I know how the game works. You probably know as well because you've been there. Here's the truth, guys. Passive income. If you don't find a way to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die, just like Warren Buffett said. It's got to change. All right, so let's talk about these 5 steps. So whenever we work with clients, we really take them through these 5 steps, whether they know it or not. These are the 5 basic stages that they go through. And this is something that, again, I've developed over time, not just because it worked for myself, but it's something that we've perfected over time with hundreds and hundreds of our clients and refined it over the years. And so it really has become very formulaic in how we do it. It seems really simple, almost common sense to us. But for our clients, it becomes completely life-changing and altering of their perspectives and, of course, of their financial situations too. And so I want to share that with you guys, give you a little bit more and give you some examples of that. So number 1, this launch pad, right? This is the beginning where we start. I'm gonna, like actually, I was gonna try to see if I can share it on the screen, but I don't want to switch off of this and then go back. But we give you a spreadsheet when you first get started, and this Excel spreadsheet tracks everything. It looks at everything from income and expenses. So we have you putting in line item by line item the income and expenses. By the way, this is the hardest work people do in our process, is just knowing where they are. Because here's the deal: if you're trying to use a GPS and you were saying, I want to get to Disneyland or wherever you want to go, right? You got to have a point A to start from. And so if you turn off your locator on your phone, it's going to say, I can't get you there. I don't know how to get you there because we don't know where you're starting from. So you got to have a point A to know where you're starting from. What do we have to work with here? What's going on in your situation? Everybody's different. Every situation is different. Even though we can use the same process and system, still everybody has this individual need. We can't just throw you in a bucket and just give you this blanket advice, right? Just so you know, as a disclaimer, we're not investment advisors. We're not somebody who just tells you, here's investments you got to do, right? And we're not even selling investments. We stay away from that stuff. We're not raising money. There are some people out there saying, here's the thing you can invest in. By the way, it's our own fund, and we get paid when you put money in. So you can't really trust their intentions. We don't do that. We don't get paid on investments and things like that. But we do help you strategize, and then we can even help connect you to good vetted investments like the ones I've used for myself. So Launchpad is really like seeing where you are. So looking at income and expenses, what's your balance sheet, right? Like what's your assets and liabilities? So we're looking at the whole thing. Debt, what's your debt like? Are there ways we can pay it off and do it creatively? And really getting yourself on that way. We're really looking for the low-hanging fruit of what can we do to improve your cash flow right now. And so, like for example, one thing I teach people in this is that you want to get lean, get liquid, and get out. So get lean means you're tracking your money. Again, you don't have to be cheap, but be responsible and find what are those things where we can cut different costs. What are subscriptions that I have that maybe we shouldn't be using anymore? What are some of those things maybe we're eating out a little bit too much? Maybe we can scale back on that a little bit more, Now, if you're not eating out a whole lot, maybe we should be doing more eating out, right? Maybe we should actually have a date night. And maybe if you're not doing that, maybe we should try to make sure we create enough cash flow so you can have a date night once a week or something like that. What are things like that? Like what about, like we talk about a lot of cash flow secrets, right? Creative ways to pay off debt. I just worked with a client yesterday, in fact, and this is an old client I've had for 15 years. They kind of came back for a review because they really haven't done the investing part of it. They've done more of the budgeting aspect. And they're saying, man, like we've saved some money, but we need to know what to do with it. But as I'm looking through their stuff, I'm like, well, what about this? Can we cut back a little here? By the way, you're paying a lot in merchant account fees through your business, because they say, yeah, our credit card fees have gone up. Maybe we can find a way to do that. So I referred them to some of the same woman I have used as well. I said, here, go talk to her. Maybe we can save you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a month, depending on how much you transact through your practice, And so things like that, even things like taxes, I'll tell you, taxes is a big one for so many people that especially if you're a business owner, almost guaranteed we find at least 5,000-10,000 a year with our business owners when they get a good tax strategist that we can refer them to versus just using their typical CPA that says, here's your tax bill for the year, right? This is a good example. I mean, I had this doctor where, he was 62 years old, been working his practice, starting to get to the point where he's almost now paycheck to paycheck. His business had actually been declining year after year with profit. And so when I looked at the situation, I said, well, let's look at this. I mean, actually, if we take 100,000 of your IRA, he had 500,000, $500,000 IRA. So what if we take 100,000 of that, use that money to then help kind of pay off some debts and everything else, refinance your mortgage? We can actually free up $4,200 a month in just loan payments. And he's like, yeah, but Chris, how am I going to retire? If we use my IRA money, I won't be able to retire. I said, well, the 100,000 will free up 4,200 a month. That's 50,000 a year. You realize that's a 50% rate of return on your money with no risk. It's guaranteed. It's not like an investment. It's real. Like that money's freed up. And he kept arguing with me. He's like, yeah, but I can't retire. I'm like, this is retirement. 50,000 a year right now, today. You don't even have to wait for retirement. It's there. And finally, it was his wife's like, honey, this makes sense, because it's always the women that get it first, right? She's like, it makes sense. Like, let's just do it. You still have 400,000 sitting in your IRAs you haven't used. So we did, freed up the 4,200 a month. And we also found some tax savings. It's over 10,000 a year. It might have even been closer to 20. I can't recall exact number right now offhand, but it was over 10,000 a year. So already it's 60,000 a year. But here's the cool thing, guys, is that he also increased his business income by about 30,000 a year by doing nothing more than just feeling relief, by relaxing a little bit, because now he's had really, 60,000. That's 5,000 a month average back in his life again. He's saying, oh, now I don't have to work so hard. And so his work became fun. And as a result, more and more patients started saying yes, even though they weren't more people coming through his door. And so he's making like another 30,000 a year just because he's happier, just because he's more relaxed and not needing money as much. So that's 90,000 a year. And we didn't even do anything with his IRA yet, right? That's what I mean by cash flow. Sometimes the biggest things happen. Same thing with this client right here. Like she had, they had $5 million, her and her husband, 5 million in different stocks, mostly tech stocks. So I was really scared and they were a little bit scared too. They wanted to diversify. But I looked at that. I was like, wait, if we refinance, and pay off some of these specific loans, we have a very specific strategy that's different than typical debt pay down strategies you see out there. We use a cash flow index as one that I created when I was broke in 2008. So we use that strategy. We're able to free up $3,800 a month with no money out of pocket. That tax savings also, it told us it was actually over 30,000 a year. So already, guys, they're already freeing up 75,000 a year. And then, of course, we tell them, hey, what if we sell this rental property? You got this rental property not cash flowing. Get the equity out. We can make another 2,000 a month with that equity. So now they're already at this point, guys. Like you can already do the math. They're already about 100,000 a year, and they haven't done anything with the stocks they initially wanted to do something with. Right? That's what's fun. That's why this first meeting is always fun. It's like, wait a minute, we can see some stuff here. More than just investing money, we can actually improve your cash flow. Like I said, just yesterday, I was meeting with some clients, and they're like, we don't know what to do. And I'll tell you, it was interesting because husband and wife, this is common. They have different perspectives. Anybody even that are married, you realize this, like you might have a different perspective than your spouse. And if that spouse happens to have the same perspective as you start to wonder, are you the overbearing spouse because they just go along with whatever you say, But yeah, obviously if you have a spouse, that they complete you, right? As Tom Cruise would say. And so anyways, so we see that situation a lot with couples. And with this couple, one of them was like, hey, we got this rental property. Do we keep it? Do we sell it? One look at the numbers. The other one's like, yeah, but property is actually probably going to appreciate really soon. And it's actually, close to the beach. I think we're actually going to see some big growth. And so long story short, I said, let's find something in the middle. What if we did keep the property, but what if we do that cash out refinance? At first I was saying I was against it. I said, if you sell the property, you'll make more money. But because the wife was really wanting to hold on to that property, I said, well, what if we do this instead? What if we do a cash out refinance and get about $150,000 out? It'll pay off some bills. It'll free up, even though it adds about $1,000 a month, $900 to $1,000 a month on their mortgage, it'll free up $1,100 a month. So already by, again, nothing out of pocket, they'll increase their cash flow by about $100 to $200 a month by using that equity. Even better, they still have $100,000 that they can invest. And we looked at some investment options, and one of them pays 1% a month. And I was like, hey, that would pay you $1,000 a month. So now, again, with nothing out of pocket, just using the equity from your rental property that you're still getting paid on, we can actually improve your cash flow situation by about $1,100 or so a month, right? And again, I know I'm just kind of speaking here. If you're like visual, you're like, you probably lost me when you said anything with a number on it. Needless to say, that's the beauty of it. That's why we go through that spreadsheet together and say, well, look at this. What if we did this? And we can play out those options. A big thing we talk about is get liquid. This is key because I'm going to come back to this very thing, is getting liquid, right? What do I mean by that? Is getting liquid means where do you have money that's actually able to be used? When we talk about this passive income calculator, these are the numbers you'll want to know, because we want to know how much do you have in bank savings, right? How much do you have in savings? How much do you have in mutual funds that's just lying around? Do you have money in life insurance, cash value? Do you have like a whole life or this universal life? Do you have cash in there doing nothing that maybe could be doing something? Like I mentioned, mutual funds could be old 401ks, not your current company 401k because it's probably locked up. But if you had an old 401k or some IRAs, even Roth IRAs that you have on the side, those could be used to make more money. Like I mentioned with that other client, they had a rental property. Could we cash out that? Could we sell it? Do something with that. Even your own home equity. By the way, they also had about $1 million of home equity that we didn't touch yet, but that could be an option too. And then a big one I'm seeing right now is people have maybe gold or silver, but especially crypto. A lot of people are saying, maybe I should be cashing out crypto now when it's hit the height, when dumb money's been going into it, when like nobody that knows anything about crypto puts money in. That's usually right before it corrects and goes lower again. Some people are like, maybe I should take some of that crypto out and then turn this into cash flow right now. Those are the examples of money that you'll want to know about, especially when you go do that passive income calculator, because those numbers you put in, then we'll be able to know how much passive income is possible in the next 12 months. Now, this leads to the next step: explore. Right. So, just like with this particular client here, right, when we're exploring those options, we said, okay, cool. Now let's look at this. Here's a couple different funds you can choose from, both of which actually pay you 1% a month or 12% a year of income coming in each and every month. And so that was an example of exploring. Now, again, we're not investment advisors. We don't say you should do this. We don't even say, even just because I know them or I've invested with them doesn't mean you should invest with them too. But a lot of times people will say, man, I would like to know where can I invest my money and not have to just like start from scratch like Chris Miles did, who spent the last 20 years developing this network. Like, what if I could borrow somebody else's network instead of having to Google and then maybe find some liar or charlatan that looks good. They say all the right things, but then they don't deliver, and then I lose money, right? That's one of the biggest fears we have of clients. They're always afraid of losing money. Now, I'll tell you, in investing, anybody who tells you otherwise that there's no risk is lying to you. It's not true. There's always risk. There's always some. But when you find some of the right people, especially when you start to learn how to ask the right question to know what question to ask them, so that you know whether you should feel comfortable or not, it makes it a lot easier. Especially if you're like, well, hey, I know that Chris has invested with these or other people invest with them. Doesn't mean it's guaranteed. It doesn't mean it's a recommendation, right? But it does mean that at least they've been paying, for several years. Because I look for people that have been paying their clients for, their investors and people like that for at least the last minimum 12, 15 years, that they have a good track record. Again, like I said, no guarantees, but it does minimize the risk because there are a lot of people out there that showed up in the last 5 years or so that all of a sudden say, hey, I can make you money, but they don't have a good proven track record to do that, especially if things change from the current conditions. They don't know what to do. So you really want to go with those people that, have a little more gray hair, that kind of thing. So explore those options. I had one woman where she's like, I don't know if I'm one of your best clients because my money's locked up in equity and like between my investment property, my house and things like that. She's like, I have a 401k, and she filled out the calculator wrong. She put her current 401k in there instead of the old one. And so we all of a sudden realized like, oh, well, you actually don't have the 401k you can invest with. So we started looking at ways to use that home equity or even just sell one of our properties to then get the equity out and then use that money to invest. Interesting thing that happened though, is just a few months back, she got laid off. What did that do? That freed up $250,000 of her 401k. Now she had more options. Now, normally somebody's trying to use home equity. I make sure they try to do more conservative type options where maybe you're taking from your property to buy more properties, right? As an example. And she actually bought an Airbnb type of property when she did that initially. Now she's got $250,000 and her big concern is cash flow. She wants income, especially now that she's been laid off. She really wants income, right? And so we said, well, if we take the $250,000, and again, we can make probably between, roughly about 20 to 25,000 a year of passive income by investing in like maybe debt funds and things like that. So we explore those kind of options. Now here's some kind of investments that we look at. I mentioned like rentals, but I like turnkey rentals where you're not actually being the one having to manage the property. Somebody else manages the property for you, and you can buy it anywhere in the country, even where the cash flow is better than probably in your own backyard. You can lend your money, have notes. We actually just had a podcast release on our Money Ripples channel about, or actually from the OG, I would call him in the space. He's been doing it for 45 years, talking about how to invest in lending and notes. This has been huge lately because people can make easily 10+% a year by being the bank for real estate investors. And if they don't pay you, you have a property you can claim. It's yours, right? There's also different types of funds, not mutual funds, but it could be like a debt fund where maybe instead of being in one property, you might have your money invested in multiple properties and things like that, and even multiple types of real estate so that you're a little bit more diversified. You can invest in apartments. There's self-storage units. You can pool your money with other investors and be able to buy these kind of things. Oil and mineral rights. That's one thing I figure if I have to pay more money at the gas pump, I might as well get paid on the back end too. It's been kind of nice to see that even though short term, you may not see a lot of massive, cash flow. After we've now been in investments like this for the last few years, we're starting to see some good stable cash flow coming in. Then even partnerships, maybe you partner with some other real estate investors, you finance it, they do the work. I'm doing this with a raw land investment right now where we actually have invested a little over now, probably about 550,000 total. But now we have over $1 million worth of raw land that's cash flowing us $13,000 a month right now. So things like that are just different types of investments. So those are like things you explore. But the thing is, you're always like, well, how do I know which one? That's the good news, is that you can come back to us. And this comes the third step about committing. You're like, how do I commit? How do I know which ones are which? Well, we're not on their payroll, right? We're not the ones trying to sell you these investments. A lot of times our clients will come back and say, all right, I met with them. Now, some clients will be like, this one made sense. I'm going for it. But other times they'll come back and say, okay, I have some additional questions. I've asked them this, but what's your perspective, Chris or Craig, who coaches really our clients, at this point now? It's like, what's your guys' perspective? Like, what do you guys think? And then we can give our honest answer, because again, we're not on their payroll, right? We're not like working for them. We work for you, because we charge you guys a fee. And by the way, we only charge you a fee if we know we can make more for you in the first year than what you pay us. Otherwise, we never even offer it to you. So that's where we get to the commitment. It's like, how do we commit now to get into these deals? Now, while you're doing that, right? Just kind of talk about that. One example, I had one client who he actually worked with me for several years, and then he came back and he said, "Yeah, Chris, like I'm thinking, I don't know what to do because I just sold off some business interest and I have a lot of taxes due. I don't know what I'm going to do." By the way, this guy has us on retainer. So after our clients, pay us the initial fee, we keep them on a pretty low monthly retainer. It's like, maybe I'm not really using you, Chris. Maybe I should just cancel it. And I said, well, if you do, you come back, it's going to be more expensive because we grandfathered him in on a lower price. So he's like, well, let's do a call. We do a call. He's like, yeah, I've got all these taxes that I probably do, probably into the six figures of taxes. And I said, well, what we could do is, with some of this money, we can actually go into a business partnership that you can pay into. This is like the partnership like I'm in with Raw Land. And I said, you do this, you'll actually get a write-off on the initial investment going in. And so we'll actually reduce your tax burden. And I think it would save him like something like $30,000 in taxes. So even though he's barely paying me anything per month, he found out pretty quickly that one call more than made his money back. In fact, it would probably take him a lifetime of those monthly fees to even equal what we saved him in taxes. And so anyways, needless to say, I'm glad at least he decided to stick around, because that made a big, big difference for him. Plus that's not even including all the cash flow that he would be making from that investment too. All right. This is also where a lot of times we talk about max ROI infinite banking. Usually in these first three phases, we might bring that up and start talking about how to diversify your savings, get your money to pay you twice, that sort of thing. That comes up a lot. Protect. This one is one of those things that it may or may not lead to more cash flow, but it does ensure that you have more peace of mind and that you're protected. And these are things like dealing with insurances, right? Estate planning. It could even be like tax strategies, because tax strategy is a form of protection. This is something like, how do we make sure that no one event can take your money away? Lawsuits, right? Death, health issues, disability, whatever it might be. We had one client, for example, where their practice actually flooded. They had flooded and everything, right? And so of course, the insurance was fighting them on it. There are some insurance companies that don't like to pay. And so I connected them with our property and casualty insurance. The person does like auto home liability, right? Connected with him. He says, he's like, I used to be a claims adjuster. Here's what you need to do. He's like, here's how you need to word it. So he got him to word it, and finally got the insurance company to reverse their decision. They decided to actually cover the cost of like over $25,000. What did they do with that $25,000? They bought some equipment to go in their office that generated another $2,000 a month. So, again, it's kind of like that monk story you might have heard about, that Chinese proverb about good luck, bad luck. I don't know, right? It was like bad luck turned into good luck, and it turned into something much better. And it helps when you have that team around you. That's why we have not just ourselves, but we have other financial experts to help out in that situation. So that was big. I even had a client where she was a single woman. This is the interesting thing, is that this actually was a cash flow play, but she was single and didn't have any children, didn't have any heirs. We're talking about getting life insurance, and more as a strategy for savings more than just the death benefit. Well, after a while, she's like, wait, why do I have this? And so she's like, I'm going to cancel my life insurance. I say, well, if you do that, you're going to have to go back to traditional financial planning, which means that money you have in the IRA, you got to start pulling off less income, because you don't want to run out of money, because that life insurance death benefit gives you a permission slip to spend money while you're alive. Because the good news is you got that, it's like $1 million death benefit. I said, here's the thing, is like, we can actually do a reverse mortgage for you in retirement right now, because she was in her 60s. I'm like, we can actually do a reverse mortgage, paying you about $2,300 a month for really like the rest of your life. That's 2,300 a month. Plus, now the money you have in these IRAs, we can start pulling out principal and interest because we don't care if you run out of all that money. Because the good news is, even if you pull it all out, even if you do run out, you still got money in the life insurance. We can start pulling money out of there too. And then whatever you leave behind, you can pay off debts or whatever else by using that life insurance. And then there would be no bills, nothing due. And so it was actually a difference between her pulling out 60,000 a year versus about 140,000 a year by having the life insurance in place. So it does have an effect on cash flow. Sometimes it's just trying to save people money. I had one client where we saved them about $900 a month in different insurance costs and things like that. Health insurance is another big one. We actually had a client that saved over $1,000 a month recently because the quote unquote affordable health care plan wasn't very affordable for them. But we had a guy, Keaton Patey, on our team that was able to get them a much lower rate. So, and I've done the same thing. For me, I pay for my family, almost $2,000 a month, and now I'm paying like $400. So things like that. It protects, but it can also be a cash flow play too. And then the last step, which is my favorite one, but it also requires the most patience, which is the income avalanche. Right? Is what do we do with this income? As it's coming in, when you start to create all this passive income, the money's coming in from the investments. Now we start saving up that money to then keep reinvesting again and again. So instead of compound interest, right? You always hear about compounding interest, the eighth wonder of the world, but you never see it, never benefits your life at all. We're compounding income. Because say, for example, you're able to improve your cash flow and passive income by 30,000 a year. You take that 30,000, invest the next year. And if you make only 10%, guess what? Now that 30,000 a year becomes 33,000 a year. Then you take that 33,000, you invest that. Becomes 36 plus thousand a year, right? And so on and so forth. Now, if you're adding more money to it, maybe it's not that's 30,000, but maybe you're already saving 10 or 20,000 a year. Now you got like $50,000. You can bump it up to over 40,000 that next year, right? And so on and so forth. So that's where it's to be fun. Now it does require patience. For some people, this is like the grass growing phase. This is usually when our people go from just when they paid us the upfront fee to now on a retainer at this point, and now we're just tweaking the plan as we go along. And just so you know, plans do change. For example, even when we talk about investments, I'm talking about different investments right now that are better suited for a lot of people today than they were 2 or 3 years ago. For example, 2 or 3 years ago, well, more going to 3+ years ago, people were all the rage about multifamily apartment buildings. But then 2022, what happens? Interest rates skyrocket, multifamily just becomes crap. And so as a result, very few of our clients ever did anything with multifamily after that point, unless they just did it anyways. And then they found out why I said, you got to be careful, because then they're like, oh, now my money's locked up longer than we expected and we're not getting paid. Right. The good news is, I'll tell you this, of all of our investments, only about 5% have either like had to delay payments where they had to, stop paying for a bit. Doesn't mean they're not going to make money. It just means they had to stop making any interest payments to them for the time being. So that's really good. There's some groups out there that over half of their deals have gone south. And so some people have lost all their money in with one single group because they're in multiple investments that all went bad. So I'm very, very grateful that we haven't had that kind of situation. But again, taking that income and creating that more and more, really compounding your income to grow faster, right? So like, for example, I had one client here, this woman, like she had $650,000. Her goal was to get to about 6,000 a month or 72,000 a year. Now, it took a couple of years for her, but she did start to get money into like some oil investments. It took a little time to ramp up for those. The debt funds paid right off the bat. So did the real estate fund. And then eventually she did get to like her goal, over $6,000 a month. Right. I had this client here. He was actually in his late 20s. He's like, hey, here's my goal. He's like, with the cash flow I'm doing right now, my goal is 5,000 a month. I'm trying to get to 2029. Here's my plan. He basically just wants to buy like 1 or 2 rental properties every year that cash flows. Now, granted, it could be more or less depending on how the cash flow is. Like right now, I would say that those rentals are going to be paying a little less. But you never know. Sometimes you find a really good one in the mix. But still, the fact is he could actually retire in his 30s. You know how many times I used to have a 5,000 a month goal over 20 years ago, because in the early 2000s, 5,000 a month was like 10 or 12,000 a month today. So the great thing is, if you're worried about trying to chase after inflation, you have to have more than what you think you're going to need. The great thing is, if you can create cash flow now, inflation is not as big of an issue, because now you're getting there much quicker than waiting 30, 40 years out. And we're, right. I'll tell you, 5,000 a month will be below the poverty line probably in the next decade or two. It'll be, people say 60,000 a year. I can't survive on that. That's possible, guys. It's very possible. A good example of another one. I had a client where he was actually planning. He bought a lot of rentals specifically in his situation. Now we're looking at more doing debt type of stuff instead of buying more rentals. But he started out with just a quarter million in his mutual funds. Now 6 years later, he's got to the point where now it's about $4,000 a month. We could actually probably increase it a little bit more by selling some of these properties and investing that money too, getting it close to maybe 4,500 a month. His goal, by the way, is about 4,500 to 5,000 a month for himself. We have other clients that have more. Most of our clients will usually have at least 10,000, 20,000 a monmonth goal. But it just depends. We've had some where they're able to do it that same year, because they might have $1 million making 10%, 100,000 a year, right? It's kind of easy. I had another client where this guy, he kind of did this avalanche sort of thing. It didn't just happen in 1 year. It took, multiple years. I was trying to convince him to sell off a rental property to take the equity out because he had 700,000 of equity in that property. But he didn't want to let go of it because it was his first rental property. He was just going to pay off the mortgage and then he would cash flow 2,400 a month. I said, well, what if we just sold it, got that $700,000 out, and you could go and invest that money elsewhere? Even if you bought rental properties again with that money, because he was afraid of getting taxed, you can tax-free exchange it to other rental properties. And so he did. He did more out in the Southeast. He bought 6 properties with that money. That started cash flowing him over like 7,000, 8,000 a month. Or sorry, he got him about 6,000 a month in the beginning. Now it's been a few years later. He's been reinvesting that money, and now he's at over 8,000 a month on his properties. He's now hit over 100,000 a year just with that one property that was only paying him $200 a month, and he was hoping to pay off the mortgage next year to create 2,400 a month. But now he's over 8,000 a month. So that's the kind of cool thing is when you have that kind of perspective outside. Sometimes you kind of open up and say, wait a minute, I even considered this before. It's not that it's hard necessarily. It doesn't require like this magical, financial genius brain. All right. But it does require seeing things from a different light, especially different from what financial advisors and the typical financial advice will teach you, so that you can see ways to actually create money now, because everybody's teaching you how to do it way in the future when you may not even be alive then, instead of right now. So that's the thing. Like I said, understanding these principles, then you start to use like strategies like max ROI infinite banking along with passive investments. And then you just keep repeating that cycle over and over, creating that income avalanche. So guys, this is where, again, cash flow creates freedom. I'm just going to ask you this because I know it takes about a minute or so for me to see your questions. If you got questions, go ahead and ask this. I'm wrapping this up right now. So start typing them in because I want to make sure we address it here. So start typing your questions right now. I'll make sure I give you a couple minutes for that. So just for a few questions here. So again, cash flow creates freedom. I mentioned my dad being my inspiration, right? I mean, my dad, it was so tough for him. Like he's lived to be 80 years old. He's going to be 81 this year. None of us ever thought he would be alive, especially 20 years ago. I mean, he didn't even think he'd be alive right now. He's still blown away that he's still alive to this day. But here's the thing, guys, is like because of that choice, right? Because he was doing exactly everything he was told by financial experts, financial advisors, his parents. I mean, depression era mentality, everything else. He saved and saved and saved. He worked hard, saved, sacrificed everything in hopes that he would have a future someday. And instead, he's having to stretch out his dollars for the rest of his life, however long that life goes. And it keeps going, right? And that's the thing is that, you can be alive, but it doesn't mean you can actually be living a living, right? You can't really have all that freedom that goes with being alive. What if you could have that freedom? What if you could create a legacy that's different? What if you could have a different? That's the thing for me, being that next generation, I was able to change that. And now it's a different trajectory for my family. Now trying to teach my kids, try to teach them like, hey guys, don't listen to all the things you've been hearing in schools and in media and even from your mom, and things like that, my ex-wife, it's like, don't just listen to the traditional advice because it doesn't work. It hasn't created financially free people. If it were, Fidelity wouldn't say, hey, only 1.8% of our people have at least $1 million in their mutual funds after saving for decades. And of that 1.8%, 35% thinks they'll never be able to retire. Don't be that statistic. Don't be the 99% that say, gee, I hope I can stretch out these dollars. Good thing I have Social Security and the government to rely on, right? Don't do that. Like, that's not the way to live. That's hoping and praying somebody else will take care of you. You can create independence for yourself. I took a screenshot on my phone because I was actually driving to the bank. And while I was driving there, I noticed, of course, I was just a block or so away from the bank, but notice that the other direction would be 24,855 days and 3 hours slower than that way. I'll tell you, the slow route is doing the same thing you've been taught for your entire life, right? is if you just keep saving and saving and hoping if you pay off your debt that you're going to be free. I'm seeing it over and over, guys. And I've seen it for the last 23 years I've been in this financial business, is that I've seen what's been occurring and the cause and effect, and it's not pretty. But I've also seen the opposite. I've seen the opposite where I've seen so many of our clients have freedom they never knew was possible. Those that said, oh my gosh, I could die any day now, but now I'm creating a life today so I can spend that time with my family while they can still spend time with me, right? That they can actually have that ability to do and follow their passion projects and do those kind of things. A lot of these people don't want to just retire. They want to do something more with their life. They want to maybe give back more. Maybe they want to go serve and go do volunteer missions or whatever it might be. They might want to just have another business they start that's more aligned with their passions than what their job was, their job was. Some of them just want to keep doing their business, but know that they can show up to work because they want to, not because they have to, just like I'm doing right now. And I'm telling you, it's so much more liberating and powerful when you come from that place of choice than from a place where you only feel like you have one choice. That's not freedom. You have an option right now. So here's your next step. Your next step is do this. Go to moneyripples.com. There's that little calculator right there you can click on. Fill out the passive income calculator. Fill out completely. Like I said, the things you want to know is how much do I have in savings, right? It's very few questions. It takes only maybe a couple minutes to fill out. But know, like, what do I have in savings and different stuff too, right? What do I have in like home equity? Even ask about rental properties. If you have rental properties, like how much cash flow, net profit are you getting every month? And of course, how much equity do you have in those properties? Because we analyze that. Could we do better there? Fill it out completely so then we can actually accurately give you a number. It will spit out a number for you. No commitment, nothing. It doesn't cost any money. It's totally free. You can see here, I'll put this in right here so you can see the link. Of course, if you can't find moneyripples.com, there's the link right there. But that's where you can actually go to be able to do that. Try it out. If you get at least $15,000 as a result, we should be talking, because that's something we can actually work with. That's something we can actually do. If you get less, I'll tell you this, if you get less than 15,000, don't despair. I'm going to be doing another webinar in a couple of weeks with my friend Christina Wise, where we do have another option for you to help you get to that point, to kind of bridge that gap. But there's more stuff to do there. So anyways, try that out. But if you're getting at least $15,000, you need to be talking with us to see, one, is that a legitimate number? Did you fill it out correctly? But then two, what can make it possible? How can we actually help your dreams come true faster versus waiting longer? So, all right, guys, so that's pretty much the end of it here. I'll just end on this. If you have questions, type them in the chat right now. But like, here's the biggest deal, guys. The most dangerous risk of all is spending your life not doing what you want on the bet you can buy yourself the freedom to do it later. We don't know how long we're going to be alive. I don't know how long I'm going to be alive. But all you have right now is right now. That's the only thing you can control. What if we can create freedom today? That's it. So hopefully you guys got something. Even if you have a question, type in the comments. Did you learn something from this? What was like some of your biggest ahas? I'd love to see what you guys have here at this point. All right, let me go back through, because there might have been some questions that I missed, because there's quite a few chats here. So Shane, when we're talking about the living on scarcity, your family reality, I get it. I was there, man. Yes, Paula, just to let you know, this was being recorded. This is actually being upstreamed. No, that's not it. This is being uploaded to YouTube as we speak, because it's a YouTube live as well as a Facebook live. So yes, I definitely recommend you can go to our Money Ripples channel. By the way, if you guys haven't subscribed to the Money Ripples YouTube channel, do so. We have a video coming out every single day. Great stuff there. All right. Okay. Well, I must have really got, I know there's a lot of you guys on, but I know that some of you guys probably were like, okay, that was awesome. Well, definitely that's kind of the stuff that I talk about there. Try the passive income calculator, fill that out. That's your next step, right? Let's just see what passive income is actually possible in your situation. Guys, appreciate your time, and we'll talk soon.